I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Jody Bechtel. I am the Deputy Director of Clark County's Department of Environment and Sustainability, and this stakeholder presentation is for our Division of Air Quality, and we will be talking about rule development for our state implementation plan submission under the ozone 2015 Ozone National Ambient Air Quality Standard. So again, we are the Air Pollution Control Agency for Clark County, our Division of Air Quality under this department. This screen shows you some of the particular contacts within the department for this effort, both the ozone attainment, SIP development, and our rule development and drafting. More information on contact information for these people in these future slides. So we have held a stakeholder briefing. Our first briefing was on January 12th, and this workshop is one of 7 that will be reviewing particular regulations we are looking to promulgate. These meetings are being recorded and can be found on our website. I will place the link in the chat once I've completed these intro slides. So if you don't long link there at the bottom of the screen that will be in the chat where you can watch the stakeholder briefing meeting, and then each of these stakeholder workshops will be recorded and posted as well. Have we started recording? I just want to make sure.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So we do expect to have time during this meeting to address some of your questions. We're asking that you hold any verbal questions till the end, but you are welcome to type questions into the chat. And if we aren't able to get to all of the questions, given the time frame of this workshop, we will do our best to get back to you, and we'll be incorporating all of the feedback we receive into these efforts. So in our January meeting, we reviewed our ozone situation in detail. I won't get into a lot of detail here because of our time frame, but we do encourage you to watch the video or review the presentation from our January 12th meeting for the specifics. We are in marginal non-attainment for ozone with a current standard of 70 parts per billion, and we have been bumped, we were in marginal non-attainment. We have been bumped to moderate non-attainment. This graph kind of shows the ozone design value trends in hydrographic area 212. That's pretty much the Las Vegas Valley for the past 20 years. As you can see, overall ozone has mostly trended downward, but we have kind of been stuck in this mid to low 70 parts per billion, and we need to get these numbers below 70 parts per billion to attain. So the bump up in classification requires that we achieve attainment by August 3rd, 2024. We must establish emission control requirements in a state implementation plan, including a reasonably available control technology requirements, a 15% rate of progress requirement, and contingency measures, among other requirements, but those are the 3 that we'll be discussing in these workshops. Under EPA's final bump up rule, EPA requires us to submit a SIP by a retroactive date of January 1st, 2023. Because we are working under a deadline that has passed, we need to get controls in place as soon as possible, or we are at risk that EPA could start a sanctions clock, which could lead to loss of federal highway funds and other penalties, and allow EPA to impose a federal implementation plan to implement controls. Again, we are working diligently to avoid these, and EPA is aware that we are working diligently, and so far we are working together to meet the August 3rd, 2024 deadline of attainment. So again, we are required to look at some reasonably available control technologies. We've identified these source categories as needing action and rulemaking. These actions and those on the next slide are the rules we will be discussing in this series of workshops. We are additionally needing to show a 15% volatile organic compound emissions reduction over baseline, independent of emission reductions necessary to achieve attainment. As well, we are required to have contingency measure rules on the books that would be triggered if we haven't reached attainment by August of 2024. And these are the actions being considered for the 15% VOC reduction and contingency. Some of these overlap with the CTG RACT actions and rules, and those overlaps will be discussed in these workshops. We expect and hope not to have to implement all of these actions, and we will know for certain which are needed once our attainment model is completed and run. We expect that to be done sometime toward the end of April, but we are discussing all of these with stakeholders as if we need them all due to the tight schedule. So this table identifies the statutory timelines we're working with. Again, EPA Region 9 is aware that the SIP submission deadline is passed and therefore unrealistic. And DAQ, our Division of Air Quality, is working closely with EPA to show good faith progress to develop the attainment SIP and adopt related regulations as expeditiously as possible in 2023. We will review the rulemaking timelines that we expect in each of these workshops, which is based on an attempt to get these rules in place in the summer months of our ozone season when we have the most exceedances. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Richard Beckstead, who will review the consumer products.
So I will be doing this presentation. My name is Richard Beckstead. The topics that we're going to be covering are shown here. Purpose of the rule, the fact that we are going to ask for this to be countywide, even though it's only hydrographic area 212 that has been determined to be non-attainment. There are some exceptions for sources that are not selling within the county. And then, of course, we have a list of all of the categories of rules with the standards that we will briefly look at as we scroll through them. There's about 63 categories, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on those. And then we'll talk about the emission benefits, a little bit on the economic impact and the regulation timelines. The purpose of talking about this today is the fact that, as Jody has already said, we have been moved from marginal to moderate non-attainment for ozone. And so that triggers a requirement for a 15% reduction rate in order to demonstrate that we are on track to comply with the SIP that we are proposing to EPA. This rule, the consumer products rule, is a very important rule because it's been identified as a major component of the VOCs in the Las Vegas Valley. And also, as we reviewed, we have reviewed other states to see what they've done. And we have determined that we're going to accept the maximum VOC standards that were proposed in the 2014 model, even though we did look at California. They do have a few that are much more stringent, but at this point, we're starting with what was proposed in 2014. The regulation will apply countywide, primarily because if we only apply this to those that sell, supply, and offer for sale or manufactures these products within the hydrographic area 212, then other areas such as Boulder City, Mesquite, Laughlin, Prim, and areas within the county would be able to sell these products, and they would migrate back into the Las Vegas Valley, which would have a detrimental effect on our ability to move towards attainment and also to be able to demonstrate that we are enforcing this rule. Okay, there are those that will be exempt from the rules. Primarily, those are the ones that are selling, supplying, or offering for sale, or primarily manufacturing with the intent to ship or use without, outside of the Clark County. Also, those that have taken precautions to make sure that what they do distribute and send out cannot be used within the county. In other words, there has to be practices put in place to demonstrate to us that you do not intend or will not allow these things to be sold or distributed within the county. These, I'm sure most companies are already familiar with these rules. This rule specifically has been in place, as you can tell, for at least 9 years at the 2014 level, and it's been used for nearly 20 years in some areas. Okay, the standards that we're looking at are these. These are the basic standards that are in the OTC rule. That's the Ozone Transportation Commission rule. It has been updated several times. The most recent update, of course, was 2014. This applies to consumer products and adhesives. And as you can see, the standards are probably typical of what is being sold throughout the county already, but we would like to get an idea as to how much of this is already being done. Right now, we do not take credit for any of this towards a reduction of VOCs, and so we need to get more information on this. But air fresheners, automotive products, all the way down charcoal lighter, floor strippers, glass cleaners, hair spray products. It covers just about anything and everything that we use on a daily basis as household products and also within various businesses. Shaving cream, wood cleaners, tire sealants, all of these things all have VOCs. We are proposing that the flammable or extremely flammable multi-purpose solvents and paint thinners not be sold. I believe that is in place in many areas in the county already. I know that I've tried to buy some of these and found that that I've not been able to buy has been much, much less volatile than what I could buy elsewhere. And of course, if what is being sold contains less than 1% by weight aromatic compounds or has methylene chloride, perchloroethylene, trichloroethylene in a combination of amounts equal to or less than 0.01% by weight are exempt from this moratorium. Also, all products must be able to meet the labeling requirements of this rule. There are some reporting requirements, which then, of course, leads to the fact that there are going to be record-keeping requirements that most businesses are already keeping for other areas that they're supplying. And this requirement will allow DAQ to submit a notice to a supplier with a 90-day written notice to give you time to collect your information that needs to be submitted to us in order to demonstrate that you are complying with this rule. There are some issues about confidentiality, and of course, in the rule, it does talk a little bit about that. The confidentiality is defined in our Nevada revised statutes, and the rule points to that statute so that you can see what the confidentiality limits are in the state of Nevada. Now, the reason we're doing all this is in order to get some emission reductions in order to help us demonstrate compliance with the SIP or to get us into compliance. We're behind the 8 ball with this because we were officially notified in the Federal Register on the 4th or 5th of January. And of course, it notified us that we were already 4 days late in meeting the statutory requirement to do this by the 1st of this year. Because of that, we're in a rush to try to get these rules out so that we can get them in place to help us during the ozone season, which starts in May typically and runs through September typically. Sometimes you get a little bit high in April, but typically these are the highest months. This rule, if we do it as aggressively as what we're looking at doing, the earliest that we can get this into an effective and enforceable position is July 4th of this year. That's halfway through the ozone season, which is troubling for us. By enacting these standards earlier, and in 2023, could be the first year towards progress that we can show. We're hoping that those that are going to be under this rule, as we talk about this and as we move through this process, will recognize that if we do not meet this reasonable progress, then of course we will be pushed up into serious non-attainment or have other findings, which will then of course bring about more stringent reductions. So we are hopeful that the manufacturers and suppliers will voluntarily begin reducing their VOCs on these products as quickly as possible, and hopefully even before the beginning of the ozone season, so that it will have an impact on what we are doing here in Clark County. Of course, that is voluntarily because we cannot enforce this until such time as the board has approved it and it becomes enforceable. As far as economics, we are aware that the vast majority of consumer products that are affected by these amendments are already commercially available in the markets here in Clark County and elsewhere. We are setting a 30-day period after adoption that will give manufacturers some time to reformulate the products, if necessary, to make them compliant with the VOC content limits and make any changes to product distribution channels in order to bring us into compliance. Now, we do have a sell-through. I know in many cases, these are 1 year, 2 years, but because of where we set with regards to our deadline dates, we are forced to move to a much more aggressive stance, and that is that anything that is manufactured prior to the effective date must meet the standards within 30 days after the effective date, so that everything that is sold or offered for sale within Clark County will be compliant to these by the first part of August. Any customer or adhesive that do not display on the product containers or packages the date on which the product was manufactured, or a date code indicating such date, cannot be sold or supplied or offered for sale within the county. A couple questions that we'd like you to consider is, are there any other state rules that would serve better for a model for the OTC rules that we're looking at? We're looking at the OTC rules because they are the floor, so to speak. This is the very minimum that EPA will accept for submittal for the rate of the 15% rate of progress. And so we're starting at the very lowest, so that we have room to move up if necessary. If we can't get to where we need to be by starting at the bottom, we will have some room to move up closer to what other states and California have done. As we are the assumptions that compliant commercial products and adhesives are already being sold in Clark County is about 60% accurate. Is that higher or lower? If you can give us some feedback on what you know of what it is, we are limited on what we can see from our side. Is the sell-through time of 30 days too aggressive? We're hoping that by giving you notice well ahead of the July 4th, that gives time for companies to begin getting ready earlier so that we can at least have everything in place during the ozone season. And as has been said, the earlier that we get these things in place, the greater the impact will be on this ozone season, and the higher the potential is that the ozone season will be compliant with the current ozone standard of 0.07% ppm of ozone. How much reformulated products will be needed, given that nearly 20 states have already adopted these OTC rules? We are aware that there are specialty products that may need to be reformulated or just not sold. We would like some feedback on these things, and any information you can provide us will help us to produce a much better rule. This is the timeline as far as our rulemaking. Of course, we are having a workshop today, February 8th. We're asking that you provide all your comments by March 1st so that we'll have time to address all comments and put those into a rule that we can put into public notice on April 9th to begin the 30-day public notice that's required in order to put this rule before the Board of County Commissioners for approval. The end of the notice then would be May 9th. After that, we will take that to the board to set the time for the public hearing. That'll take place on June 6th. And the board will then have, contingent upon their approval of our requesting the public hearing, which they will, we're confident of that. The board will set the public hearing, and it will be held on June 20th. At this public hearing, anyone is allowed to come in and speak in favor of or against this rule. We are hoping that we can deal with all of these issues prior to that so that we will get as much positive feedback in front of the BCC as we can. The way that it's set up is once the BCC has approved the rule, then it goes back out to public comment for 14 days, after which it automatically becomes, on that 14th day, it becomes a law in Clark County and is therefore enforceable. If there's any questions?
Richard, this is Araceli. I'm going to go ahead and start with the first question we received, then I'll get to the people that have their hands up. Gary Jones is asking, will the limits for products in this rule only apply to products that are sold at retail locations?
It will apply to anyone that's also distributing to retail locations. In other words, as of July 4th, assuming that that's the date that this is all approved, then the distributors cannot send out to the retail locations as of that date. So yes, it applies at the retail, but that's where the sell-through comes in. As I say, we're hoping And the reason we're hoping is we cannot enforce this rule until it becomes law, but we are hoping that the community will work with us, knowing that if we can't show reasonable progress, that we will go with more and more stringent rules, that perhaps if we just voluntarily help to kick this off as soon as possible, then we may be able to stay at moderate, and that way this may be as stringent as we become. But manufacturing to be sent to Clark County must be within these rules by July 4th. That's the way the law is written. We are hoping that they will stop sending them before that so that we can start moving more and more towards attainment. But we cannot force that. That's why we're saying this is voluntary. So yes, it does apply to the end user, and they can sell all the way up through about, I believe it'll be the 3rd of August will be the 30 days after the approval of the rule. And after the 3rd of August, then they will not be able to sell anything after that. As anything that's in excess of the standard.
Okay, and then Cameron Liddell is asking, will online manufacturers located outside of Clark County that sell direct to consumers be brought into the program?
Yes. What this is saying is manufacturers cannot ship to Clark County anything that's outside of the standard. If they do, then that negates and makes it so that EPA can see that we are not able to enforce this rule. And if we cannot enforce the rule, then of course the rule is it's a sham rule. And EPA has a very strong stance against sham rules. So manufacturers shipping directly into the county products that are not within the standard, our enforcement staff will, once we identify them, there will be fines, and all the way up to notifying them that they can no longer ship into Clark County. So it's a very serious issue. We must get only the right, we must maintain the standards, especially after this becomes law. And we're hoping if they will do this before, then of course the 30 days is a much easier timeline to be able to comply with.
Thank you. Gary Jones also asks, what is the current level of emissions from these products in the county, and how much will the emissions be reduced as a result of the rule?
All we have are models because we have not been tracking exactly what has been happening here in Clark County. The models that are being run take into consideration our population, and assuming that these standards are not in place, then of course it identifies that our emissions will be much higher. I do not have those numbers in front of me. I have seen them, but by instituting both the consumer products rule and the AIMS rule, and I believe one or two other rules that will allow us to demonstrate that we are having a 15% reduction.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and allow Doug to go ahead, and I'm going to turn on your mic and your camera if you wish to be on camera. Let's see. Doug? Oh, let me see. I'm sorry, we can't hear you. Hold on. Doug, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear
Okay,
me?
yes.
This is Doug Raymond. I run Raymond Regulatory Resources. I am also the consultant for the National Aerosol Association. I have been dealing with VOC regs since 1988. Have been involved with all of the CARB regs and all of the OTC regs. And I can tell you, Richard, that some of your assumptions are so far off, they're ridiculous. I hate to be that way because I just met you, but for one, not 20 states have done this. 20 states have adopted OTC regs, but not 20 states have adopted Rule 4. Okay, Rule 4 only has 9 states that have adopted it.
Okay.
So that's one thing that you should correct in your statements, or
Okay.
at least make sure are clear. I'm going to let Nicholas talk about the other states that you probably should be looking at of how you wrote the rule. But what I want to talk about is the sell-through and the effective date. The sell-through, we typically have a 3-year sell-through, okay? And that's in California. Some states have an unlimited sell-through because once this stuff is sold to the retailer, there is no way to get it back. 30 days on the shelf is nothing. I mean, there could be product on that shelf for 2 years. So I don't know how we're supposed to get anything back once it goes to the retailer, because once it's there, we can't go in and get it. So even if we stop sale immediately, you're still going to have product on the shelf for at least a year. So for the 30 days, that is just pretty much out of the question. There's no way to get that stuff back. And now you're talking about all the stuff that's already in the pipeline. How are we going to stop all the stuff that's already in the pipeline that's already going to those retailers? That's why we have a 3-year sell-through in the state of California, which is the most strict right now. A lot of states have no sell-through. So I just wanted to let you know that. And then having the effective date less than, what is this, 10 days, 12 days after the rule is adopted. I don't know how you're going to be able to do that because, yes, some people have product that's ready to go. However, there's going to be regional people. There's also going to be other people that cannot get the product to that area in time. They have to go through all their computer systems. They have to go through and change whatever products they have. And that's for the people that have product. And what you're talking about there are the large consumer manufacturers. If it's a small consumer manufacturer, somebody in Colorado or somebody out that way, they may not have products and they would have to reformulate. That means they would have to pull the product or not sell the product into the state. And that could be extreme hardship for some of these people, because once you lose retail shelf space, you may never get it back. So for some of these smaller guys, that could be a kiss of death in Nevada. So I don't know where you got some of your assumptions, but I guess I'm here to tell you that a lot of those assumptions are not even close to being correct. I don't know. I can answer any other questions you have, but that's as far as the sell through and the effective date, those are just not even close to being reasonable. Even if we stopped today, we couldn't do it.
If we can, if you can leave us your contact information.
Absolutely.
That's part of the reason we're having this, is because we are under the gun trying to get this out. And because of that, today we're presenting the most aggressive stance that we can to try to get feedback as to whether or not this can be done. Because, I have been a manager here where I was over the permitting program for stationary sources. And this rule is nothing like a stationary source rule. This is new ground for Clark County, having to do this kind of stuff. But we had assumed that because of our proximity between California, Utah, and Arizona, who are all in the same boat as us, that perhaps we weren't just an island that businesses were dumping into, and that perhaps we were getting the same products as are being shipped into California. That was one of the big assumptions. If that's not correct,
And Richard,
then
you probably are correct that there are some products that are same.
mhm,
However, it usually doesn't happen that way, because if the people, I don't know how to put this to you nicely, but if there is no VOC reg, the manufacturers are going to sell what products they're allowed to sell there, because obviously with manufacturing or with the VOC regs, there is a reduction of efficacy for some of those products, especially in the automotive products and stuff like that. So if you don't have to sell a VOC compliant product there, it's probably not being sold there, because it probably doesn't work as well. So I just want to let you know that. I mean, obviously, some people might be selling some of the product there, but some of the product would not be sold there.
okay. Yeah, I would like to talk to you afterwards.
Absolutely.
It'll probably
And just
be
so
next.
you know, Nicholas Georges from HCPA and I work very, very closely together, and we would probably be more than happy. He's probably going to speak next. He will. We'd be more than happy to talk together. That way, we don't take up your time twice.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. I'm going to go ahead and go to Nick. I know he had his hand up for a while, so I will go ahead and unmute him. Nick?
All right, I believe I am unmuted. Can you please confirm?
Yes.
Wonderful, and thank you so much. And Richard, to echo Doug's point, yes, certainly happy to meet with you when convenient. There is, a lot of opportunity for closer alignment with the OTC Phase 4 model rule here. So certainly happy to work with you on that. My name is Nicholas Georges. I'm with the Household and Commercial Products Association. HCPA is a voluntary nonprofit U.S. trade association representing approximately 240 member companies engaged in the manufacture, formulation, distribution, and sale of products for household, institutional, commercial, industrial use. HCPA member companies manufacture or market approximately 2/3 of the consumer product categories that are regulated under this proposal. And similar to Doug, our organization has been involved with every CARB and every OTC state activity. My personal experience has been more about half of what Doug's is here, but certainly 15 years isn't anything to sneeze at for that standpoint. HCPA as a whole, we support state regulations that are based on the OTC model rules, because consistent regional regulatory standards achieve significant improvements in air quality without impeding interstate commerce. Therefore, we support Clark County's activity on this. We would highly encourage it to be a state level activity. Ultimately, when the most populous region of the state is going to be adopting something, it makes a lot more sense for us to have it applied statewide. I understand that Clark County does not have the authority to promulgate a rule statewide, but it is something that we would encourage you all to work with your state regulators to proceed forward here. As Doug stated, 9 states have adopted regulations based off the OTC Phase 4 model rule, including your neighbors, Colorado and Utah. And so there are going to be suggestions that we request around better alignment with those regulations in the way both how the regulation proposal is written, as well as it is structured. As what ends up happening is, because companies do not formulated products or market products in all 130 product categories that are regulated, they'll go to specific sections of the proposal or rule to see, you know, what exactly Nevada has written. And when they don't see it in the location that they're used to, it leads to a number of questions that come hopefully to Doug or myself, but you know, not everybody is a member of ours or works with us. And so for those, you know, typically smaller manufacturers that Doug was mentioning, consistency with how, you know, these rules are presented is incredibly important so that people don't overlook aspects of it and get things wrong here. You know, Doug talked about the effective date. You know, typically what we request is at minimum 1 year after the publication of the final regulation, because as Doug was saying, supply chains are just too complicated to turn around and modify that quickly here. You know, from the last couple of years with the pandemic, with all the supply chain issues that everybody has faced, I think that best highlights the fact that, you know, we can't turn on a dime and change things around that quickly here. There are going to be, you know, additional things that we also request for various provisions. We would suggest utilizing CARB and South Coast testing or approvals, similar to how you did in the IPE section for things like the ACP and other things of that nature, just because it lessens the burden on you. CARB already does that work, and so, you know, we would like to figure out a way to work with you so that you're able to utilize their efforts and not have to duplicate things.
We are proposing to do that.
Okay, as I read it, it looked like it only applied to the IPE and didn't apply to the ACP, so that's wonderful to hear. Things like for the date code, rather than having companies submit ahead of time, you know, one of the things that a number of states often do as well is just make the explanation available upon request. California is the only state that mandates it on a yearly basis, and so companies that have a unique date code that doesn't follow the typical YYDDD format for the Julian date code, submit it to California. But for every other state that you know, for a lot of states or and I don't know about your specific scenario, we can certainly get into this, that don't have the robust tracking that CARB does, it makes a lot more sense to just request it or ask upon request rather than a formal submission. So Richard, you know, a number of things to go through. Like Doug said, happy to meet with you whenever convenient. With the aggressive timeline for the rulemaking that you're looking at, you know, certainly would like to do that sooner than later, and see how best we can work with you so that you achieve, you know, the both paper reductions that you need, as well as achieve some real world reductions as well. You know, as Doug said, you know, there are manufacturers that sell on a national basis. You're already, you know, having those products in the state already, but certainly there are product categories, as Doug mentioned, you know, particularly in the automotive space, where, you know, as we reduce VOCs, there's no way to make up that efficacy loss, and so certainly there are potential, you know, reductions that can be gained, and so we look forward to working with you on this to make sure that you and industry can be successful at the same time.
Let me ask you a question. I primarily use the I think it's Pennsylvania.
It was Pennsylvania
rule.
because there were 3 references in there that we saw.
Yes. Is there another state that more closely fits with what you're saying?
We just went through a rulemaking in Colorado, so I would suggest looking at their previous version. Utah is another state that we've closely worked with, and again, because, you know, when states are looking at from a regional standpoint, it makes more sense to structure these things in that manner. The other thing to look at, though, is just the OTC mile rule itself, because, you know, what we did in those states is you know, got those states to mirror what was done there, and that's overall a structure that people are more used to then.
Yeah, and that's what we were focusing on. Yes. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
So with that, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead. Gary Jones has asked, can you clarify how this rule affects adhesives that are not purchased at a retail location?
Okay, are you talking about that are purchased from the manufacturer themselves? I'm not. Sorry.
I will unmute Gary so that he can maybe clarify what he's looking for. Thank you. Gary, you should be unmuted.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. I had to unmute myself too. Yeah, my question is, it wasn't clear in your introductory remarks. You had mentioned adhesives kind of in the same breath as consumer products. And I was trying to determine if this had an impact on use of industrial adhesives versus adhesives at a retail, like a retail setting, like if someone was going to purchase a can of spray adhesive versus an industrial adhesive use.
The sprays, I think, are a little bit more covered under the Ames rule. But you caught me flat-footed on that one. It's basically, I'm going to have to talk with you a little bit more on that. So if you can give us your information, I will be contacting you. As I say, it'll be next week because we have the architectural and industrial material coatings rule tomorrow. And then once those are over, then we can focus on dealing with the questions as much as we can.
Sure, I'll put my contact info in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and address a question or post a question that was given by Patrick Geiske. And he says, how are you going to communicate to all of the retail outlets who might carry any of the products being regulated? Because you're talking about big boxes down to mom and pop stores. I'm going to let Richard address that, but also let you know that we are open to suggestions on how to get the word out. And Patrick, I will unmute you in case you want a follow-up question.
Yeah, when it comes to that type of communication, typically we would be doing that through notices in the newspaper. That's the way we've done it in the past. As I said earlier, this is our first time having to do something that's commercial because most all of the other pollutants that we deal with come from industrial facilities or like gasoline and that other type of stuff. Those things we have a very good handle on, but consumer products that people can walk into a store and just get whatever they want, this is our first time trying to handle that. So we are open to any suggestion. Right now we would use the standby that we've always used, and that's putting a notice in the newspaper identifying that, and we probably have to run that for a couple of months just to make sure everybody's had an opportunity to know. It'll also be put on our website, and we have outreach through our information officer who can put it on to Facebook, Twitter, all kinds of social media. But those are the outlets that we have.
Well, my name is Pat Gieske. I'm the technical director for a company called Seymour Sycamore. We're the inventors of aerosol spray paint. Plus, we also do chemical products as well. I work with Doug, work with Nicholas, and dealing with these regulations. You know, it's great that you're going to put a notice in the paper, but I will tell you that a lot of these mom and pop shops are not going to see those notices. If you
found that out too.
Yeah, if you have, and again, the implementation date being as short as it is, if you had an implementation date that was a year out, now you're dealing mainly with more manufacturers who then can communicate that down through their supply chain, through the mom and pop shops, you know, the big boxes, everyone else. The other comment that I have regarding the ruling is that because we are a manufacturer of spray paint, that you have spray paint listed as a consumer product. It is not showing up as being a regulated product as of yet. But in all the other consumer products regulations, when we're talking about these types of products, aerosol spray paint is exempted because California has its own aerosol spray paint coatings rule along with EPA. So you should be able to get SIP credits through both of those, well, through the EPA program. And actually EPA, we're hoping sometime this month is going to announce that they are lowering their regulation standards to meet California. So it's something to pay attention to, and all of us in our groups, because we do work together, are happy to work with you on how we can move this forward to satisfy everyone.
That would be great. As far as the aerosols, I can tell you in the presentation on the AIM coatings, coatings that we're going to talk about tomorrow, aerosols are exempt in our rule as well.
Okay, but in the documentation that you had put out, in the regulation, spray paint shows up as a consumer item and is not exempted within the regulation.
I'll take a look at that today. Thank you. And I'll.
Okay, I'm gonna, Nicholas Georges has his hand raised, so I'm going to unmute you or allow you to unmute yourself. I think that's the way it's working.
Thank you.
Should be.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Just to add a little bit here about the regulation, and I do know it's specified as consumer products rule. The consumer products that is scope, though, extends beyond just products sold at retail stores. It does apply to commercial, institutional, and even some industrial applications. So it is something that isn't just for the retailers. It is something that Doug and myself, we work with the entire supply chain so that everybody's aware of their obligations here. But Richard, just so you're aware, this does go beyond just retail stores and goes through other aspects of the supply chain as well.
Yes, manufacturers, distributors, all of that. Yes. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I'm not seeing any more in the chat. We've posted a link to our ozone attainment plan webpage where you can find more information on the controls that we're considering and also information on consumer products. And with that, it doesn't look like we have any more questions. Richard, did you have anything to add before we go through closing comments and next steps?
Just that I'd like to talk to whoever I can because our primary interest is having a rule that is functional, that is realistic, at the same time that as much as it can could possibly help us to stay out of serious non-attainment. But some of the comments have indicated that may not be possible due to the supply chain, the timelines that are going to be in part of that. So I do appreciate the comments, and I look forward to further discussions next week.
Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so the next steps, as we discussed earlier, given the timelines, the deadlines that EPA has placed on us, we are trying to adopt a fast-paced schedule for implementing these rules. We'd like to adopt these rules so that they can produce emission reductions for the 2023 ozone season. We are aiming to implement them no sooner than July 4th. We will consider all comments received today as well as any written ones received by March 1st. We are targeting to release the proposed rule for public notice on or about April 9th, followed by a public hearing for final adoption, and the rule would become effective 14 days after that. And the rule effective date would be upon adoption of the rules. So those of you who have registered for our respective distribution lists, you guys will receive updates on the development of these rules. And you can also follow the development of our plan using the link that's in the chat. Sorry about that. And just in closing, we want to ensure that inclusive public involvement, to ensure public inclusive involvement of the public and also industry and clean air advocates, we want to encourage have a participatory approach to the development of our attainment SIP and these rulemakings. Any questions can be directed to the contacts listed on this slide. And again, if you wish to receive notices on any of plan developments or any of the rules affecting consumer products, you can sign up for the distribution list by contacting Alejandro, who is listed as the rulemaking questions contact, and he will add you to that list. And with that, I don't have anything else to add. I don't know if anyone else has anything. Jody, do you want to make any final comments? Or Richard?
Yeah, I was just going to say this is exactly the sort of feedback we were looking for. We had some suspicions that some of this feedback was the case. Excuse me. So again, we were looking to confirm some of that. Looking forward to further discussions with you. Thank you for engaging. Thank you for the feedback. Don't stop if you have additional thoughts. I put some links and Alex or Alejandro's email address in the chat box. You can easily click on that. But we look forward to hearing from you, and we look forward to the dialogue, and we will again, keep you as informed as possible. Bear with us on this tight schedule, but we appreciate your involvement. So thank you. And with that,
I'm going to
go
add
ahead.
just a couple more contact information just here, and that's all we have.
Yeah.
So just, again, make sure you're on the distribution list. If you're participating in this meeting, if you already signed up, then you should be on it. But if somebody forwarded you the invite, then you're probably not on it. And so you would need to go ahead and sign up. And Alejandro can go ahead and help direct you to where you need to go to make that happen.
And again, this meeting is recorded. We will post this meeting, so you're welcome to share it with stakeholders that maybe weren't able to join. All the stakeholder meetings will be recorded and put on that website. So thank you, everybody, and have a great day, and we will be in touch.
Thank you.
Right. Goodbye.